You didn't find this message by chance. You were tuned to it just enough for it to arrive when your inner world grew quiet enough to hear. What if the thoughts that repeat in your mind aren't random? What if they're echoes, frequencies, returning to you across dimensions of time, asking you to remember something you've always known? Tonight, just breathe. Let your room soften. Let the silence stretch a little longer. You don't need to do anything except listen. This story is not here to teach, it's here to remind. Before we begin, take a slow breath. Feel the weight of your body. Notice the moment you're in. This is where your shift begins. If you're joining us from a quiet bed in Karachi, a midnight train in Berlin, or a still early morning in Toronto, check in below and let us know where and when this signal found you. Because what you're about to hear isn't information, it's recognition. We'll journey into the subtle layers of your own perception, where thoughts shape matter, emotions imprint fields, and your future self is already whispering through. Synchronicity. In a world that rewards noise, stillness is rebellion. And tonight, we return to it together. Subscribe if you feel the pull. Let's begin. There is a silence older than language, a kind of stillness that isn't the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper, like the hush that lingers in a cathedral after centuries of whispered prayers. That's where this begins. Not in a sudden revelation, not in fireworks or thunder, but in the quiet noticing of what has always been beneath your breath. You may have thought you were waiting for a sign, some external marker that the time had come, but what if it's been waiting for you to remember the signal? Not a sound, not a message, but a frequency, a field that hums under every moment, tuning itself to your awareness the moment your attention turns inward. That's what this story is. Not an instruction, but a tuning fork. A tone struck softly, enough for only the part of you that already knows to respond. You've walked through your days believing the world was solid, fixed, governed by cause and effect. But what if that solidity was only an illusion of tempo? Like watching water appear frozen until you look close enough to see the vibration. You were taught to look outward for proof, to build belief from evidence. But the fabric of this reality doesn't obey those rules. It responds to coherence. And coherence begins with remembering, not something from childhood or history, but something pre-temporal. A signature buried in your awareness, like a harmonic waiting for reactivation. This is not about becoming more. It's about becoming less distorted. Because beneath all your striving, something pure remains untouched. Have you felt it? That strange pause between thoughts where something eternal pulses through you, even if just for a breath. Or those moments where the world feels thinner, like reality itself is holding its breath and watching you. Those are not accidents. They are invitations. The veil between timelines softens in those moments because your attention aligns just long enough to pierce through. You're not hallucinating. You're remembering the texture of the field. Not with your mind, but with your frequency. Most people assume change begins with effort, that we must act our way into a new state. But in the quantum model, transformation begins with alignment. And alignment is less like climbing and more like tuning. A slight shift in inner state can ripple into your external experience, not because the world bends to your will, but because you become compatible with the version of reality already vibrating at that level. This is not manifestation, it's merging. There is a version of you who already lives what you've been yearning for. That version isn't out there. It's in phase with you, flickering just beyond your dominant awareness, waiting for you to stabilize the signal. Your body knows this. Your nervous system is a receiver older than your thoughts, and it has been whispering to you in sensations you dismissed as coincidence, goosebumps when hearing certain words, a tightening in the gut when something's off, tears without logic, peace without reason. These are not glitches. They are transmissions. The signal is emotional, sensory, vibrational. Thought comes later. Thought is interpretation. But the field speaks first in energy. When you feel stuck, it's not that nothing is happening. It's that something is preparing. The quantum vacuum, the silent realm where all potentials reside, is not absence. It's gestation. That emptiness you fear is not punishment. It's incubation. A seed must crack before the sprout emerges, and that cracking can feel like unraveling, like doubt, like fatigue. But underneath it, there is structure forming unseen, coherent, exact. You've probably noticed the strange timing of things lately. Ideas arriving just before you need them. People circling back into your life unexpectedly. Dreams that feel more real than memory. This isn't luck. It's resonance. The parts of your reality that align with your becoming are starting to glow a little brighter. Step a little closer, because your signal is stabilizing. You're phasing into the timeline where those experiences already live. And the path isn't being created, it's being revealed. Pause here. Breathe. Can you feel it? The slight shimmer in your chest when something rings true, even if you don't have words for it? That's the entry point. You don't need to understand this for it to work. The signal is not logical, it's luminous. And your job isn't to explain it. Your job is to follow the resonance. When something feels magnetically right, follow. When something drains your field, pause. This is energetic navigation. You are relearning the map of inner alignment. Let's speak of resistance then. Because as your signal strengthens, the old patterns will not go quietly. They are not enemies, but echoes, fragments of former identities trying to hold their place. Fear will come dressed as reason. Doubt will wear the mask of caution. Even your own body might react, trembling under the unfamiliar frequency of expansion. This doesn't mean you are off course. It means you are entering the 0 point, the realm where old identity dissolves and the new has not yet stabilized. This is sacred territory. You don't have to force anything here. Just breathe and witness. The field does the rest. This transition is not linear. One moment you may feel completely awakened, and the next lost in confusion. That's not regression. It's recalibration. A wave pattern, not a staircase. You are not being asked to rise above your humanity, but to anchor divinity into it. Your breath, your emotions, your imperfections, they are all sacred instruments. In this orchestra of becoming, the future self isn't somewhere above you. It's emerging through you, chord by chord. There's something else you may be noticing now: synchronicities, increasing, numbers repeating, messages that feel oddly timed. These are not just signs. They are structural feedback loops. Proof that the field is responding to your awareness. The more you notice, the more you tune. The more you tune, the more you stabilize. And the more you stabilize, the more reality responds not with effort, but with reflection. You become the tuning fork that reshapes the symphony. Stillness, too, is part of the composition. Not every part of the process is motion. Silence is not a lack of progress. It is the space where coherence is born. Before lightning strikes, the air goes still. Before matter collapses into form, the wave must settle into probability. So if life feels paused, if it seems like nothing is moving, trust that everything is tuning. You're not being delayed, you're being refined. Not punished, but prepared. And this preparation is not for something external. It's for the remembrance of what's already inside you. The part that was never confused, never rushed, never. Separate. The part that doesn't need convincing, only space to speak. Let's return to the breath. Not as a relaxation tool, but as a portal. With every inhale, you receive potential. With every exhale, you collapse probability into form. The breath is the original manifestation engine. It tunes your nervous system, balances your field, and anchors your attention into now, where all potential gathers. You're not here to master the universe. You're here to become compatible with its intelligence, to soften enough that the signal of your future self can thread its frequency through the fabric of your being. And when that happens, not all at once, but moment by moment, you won't need to chase signs. You will become the sign. Not loud, not showy, but unmistakably aligned. It is said that stars send their light across thousands of years before our eyes ever catch it, meaning that what we see tonight began long before we were born. What if your own becoming works the same way? That the signal of who you truly are was sent out long ago by a future self who already remembers, who already lives the reality you're reaching for. You are not chasing a new version of you. You are decoding the light of the one who's already arrived. And the reason it feels strange is not because it's foreign, but because it's familiar in a way you've been taught to forget. You're not here to create your truth from scratch. You're here to clear the static that's been distorting your reception. The static of fear passed down through generations. A static of needing proof before choosing faith. The static of forgetting your body is not a machine. It's an instrument. And it's been humming this entire time, waiting for you to hear your own song again. The illusion that you're lost only arises when you judge the silence. But silence, in its raw form, is not absence, it's architecture. A scaffolding for awareness, a blank page for resonance. Think of the moments you called boring, the still hours where nothing seemed to move. What if those weren't pauses in your story, but the tuning process of your frequency, aligning your nervous system to a higher harmonic? What if all that waiting wasn't about delay, but about attunement? The deeper intelligence of this universe doesn't yell. It doesn't push. It hums subtle and constant. And only when your internal volume lowers do you begin to hear it. This is why urgency is a distortion. The more frantic the signal, the more misaligned the outcome. The new timeline you're sensing doesn't arrive through force. It crystallizes through coherence. That's why you've been drawn to stillness, to slowness, to stories like this. Your system is learning to receive without panic, to expand without proof. There is a profound shift that happens when you stop asking, when will it happen? And begin living as if it already has. Not as an act of denial, but as a declaration of alignment. The mind may protest. It will want logic, sequence, certainty. But the quantum field is non-linear. It doesn't care about time the way you've been taught to measure it. It cares about resonance. And resonance isn't built through force. It's built through presence. Think of a tuning fork. When struck, it vibrates, and another fork nearby, if compatible, will begin to hum in sympathy. That is what your future self is doing now. It's already vibrating. You don't need to find it. You need to match it. And the matching doesn't happen through wishing it. Happens through embodying, breathing, walking, choosing as if it were already true. And every time you do, reality shifts not because you changed it, but because you met the version that was waiting for your arrival. Let's speak now of shadows. Not as enemies, but as indicators. When your signal strengthens, what does not match will surface. Old patterns will echo louder, not to trap you, but to offer release. Emotions will rise that don't make sense, not to punish you, but to loosen. The densities that no longer resonate. This is not regression. This is refinement. Think of it like sand in water still, and hidden until stirred. You are being stirred. Not to drown, but to clarify. Notice your dreams. The ones that feel too vivid to ignore. The ones that seem stitched from your future rather than your past. They are transmissions, soft encodings of where your field is heading. Do not analyze them too hard. Instead, feel what they carry. What mood? What temperature? What knowing? Dreams are quantum rehearsals, practice rooms for timelines. And when your waking life begins to echo their tone, you'll know you're stepping across. Have you noticed how some things that once thrilled, you now feel hollow? Or how people you loved feel suddenly distant, even if nothing's gone wrong? That's coherence too. As your frequency sharpens, what no longer aligns will blur, not out of malice, but out of mismatch. You're not being abandoned. You're outgrowing the roles you played inside a signal that no longer fits. Let it fall away gently. Everything that belongs to your becoming will remain or return not, and then there's time. Time will behave strangely now. Days may stretch or collapse. Minutes may feel like hours or vanish completely. This isn't a glitch. This is quantum plasticity. The field around you responds not just to what you think, but how you attend. Deep presence bends time, softens edges, opens doorways. It's why healing happens faster in some spaces, why grief lingers in others. Time is not absolute, it's an atmosphere. And your awareness is the weather system. When something suddenly arrives that you've desired for months, you might feel shock. Not because it was impossible, but because the signal finally clicked, like a radio station phasing into clarity after static. The clarity isn't new, you are. And the more you stabilize, the more serendipity becomes structure. That's the new template. Not magical thinking, but magnetic coherence. Try this. Speak to yourself in the language of already. Not, I hope it comes, but I'm grateful I'm receiving. Not maybe one day, but of course, this is unfolding. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between now and imagined now. It only knows the vibration. So give it the one you want to build. Let your cells swim in the mood of your arrival. Breathe it, bless it, and let the field reflect it. Some days will still feel heavy. That's part of it. Not every moment will feel elevated. But here's the shift. You'll stop interpreting those dips as failures. You'll begin seeing them as integration, as your multidimensionality stretching into this physical form. And once that becomes your default, even the struggle becomes sacred, not because it disappears, but because it transforms into texture. You are not a mistake. Your timing is not off. Your path is not lost in some divine shuffle. You are the signal, the observer, the frequency through which a new harmonic is entering the world. You're not early or late. You are right on rhythm, even if that rhythm doesn't match the clock. Your intelligence runs deeper than calendars. It moves with tides, pulses with stars, breathes with silence. You've been nudged here again and again. Certain phrases you keep hearing, patterns repeating, numbers following you. Not because the universe is trying to trick you into belief, but because you're already aligned and the field is speaking back. You're not manifesting signs. You are being reflected. The outer world is echoing your coherence. Let that be your compass now. Not how fast things happen, but how deep they feel. Not how flashy they appear, but how aligned they land in your body. Because the body is the gateway. It's where all this integrates. Not the mind, the body, the warmth in your chest, the release in your spine, the ease behind your eyes. That is how you'll know. That is your new feedback system dot. And if you ever forget, come back to stillness. Not as a timeout, but as a homecoming. The field is always here. You never left it. You only tuned out for a while. But now, you're tuning back in dot. The further you go in this remembering, the more the world around you begins to feel like a mirror curved, not always immediate, but undeniably responsive. And then something shifts. You stop asking, is it working? And begin feeling, it's happening. Not because all your desires arrive at once, but because your body begins to trust the silence. You feel less like a person chasing a future, and more like a field stabilizing into form. That's the phase shift. The alchemy doesn't happen through addition, but through clarity like clouds, parting to reveal a sun that never left. You're not changing who you are. You're removing what you are not. And what remains is signal. Signal doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It emits, silently, steadily. It aligns the outer world like metal to a magnet, not by pushing, but by simply being what it is. You've been taught to think of reality as a task, a list of goals and outcomes to be chased. But now you see it differently. Reality is a reflection pool still and neutral until you begin to pulse. And then it ripples back. Not always instantly, but undeniably, you've likely felt it already. A shift in your own posture, a quiet inner authority. You walk into a room and notice the atmosphere bends slightly. People turn without knowing why. Not because of something you say or do, but because of something you are. That's not charisma. That's coherence. And coherence is magnetic not in a showy way, but in a gravitational way. The universe moves toward clarity. And now that you're clearer, so does everything else. Let's speak now of memory, not the mental kind, but the cellular kind. The kind that doesn't live in thoughts, but in vibration. Your cells remember what your mind forgot. They remember lifetimes of tuning, of surrender, of resonance. This is why some things feel instantly right without explanation. That's not instinct, it's ancient signal recognition. The body as antenna, the soul as frequency, the moment as doorway. Some of your deepest transformations won't happen during effort. They will unfold in moments of softness, in the shower, on a walk, staring at a ceiling while music hums in the background. The field doesn't require struggle. It requires openness. This is why rest has become sacred to you, now not laziness, but receptivity. Rest is where the signal integrates. Sleep is where timelines braid. Stillness is where instruction lands not in words, but in frequency, God. And as you receive, you notice something strange. What you once called your intuition becomes louder, not just in moments of crisis, but as a daily hum guiding, adjusting, nudging. It may not speak in language. It may arrive as a knowing, a nudge, a sudden detour that leads you somewhere you didn't plan but needed to be. And over time, you begin to realize the intuition isn't a feature. It's the interface. It's how the signal navigates. It's how future you sends coordinates back through time. At first, you may still question it. Is this real? Am I imagining things? But reality will begin to answer those questions before you finish asking them. Synchronicities will multiply. Doors will open at moments too perfect to ignore. People will say things you were just thinking. Clocks will align. Songs will play with lyrics that match your thought exactly. You'll begin to smile more, not because everything's easy, but because everything's echoing. It's not luck. It's resonance made visible. You may also find yourself less reactive. Old triggers dissolve. Not because you've become numb, but because you've stopped confusing urgency with truth. You realize that emotions are just energy. In motion, data streams from different frequencies. Some belong to old timelines. Some are echoes from your ancestors. Some are simply atmospheric like clouds passing through your personal sky. You don't have to identify with all of them. You only have to listen to the ones that harmonize with the signal you're tuning toward. And in this softer place, a strange kind of confidence grows, not loud, not performative, just rooted, grounded, the kind of confidence that doesn't need to prove or explain, the kind that simply exists, like a mountain, like a tree, like breath. You know now, you are not lost. You never were. You were always transmitting. You just forgot you were the source. Some people around you may not understand this shift. They may say you've changed. They may ask what's wrong. but you'll know nothing is wrong. Everything is shedding. The noise, the roles, the pretending, it's all falling away, gently, like leaves in autumn. And what remains is something quieter, but infinitely more real. You are not getting smaller. You are becoming precise dot, and then a threshold appears not in the sky, not in a ceremony, but in the simple act of choosing. Choosing to live as if the signal is real. Choosing to speak from the frequency of arrival, not longing. Choosing to let the old patterns grieve without reattaching. Choosing to walk into each moment as the version of you who no longer needs to wait. This choice doesn't come with fanfare. It comes with silence. A moment of deep breath, a pause before a new response. A gentle yes to what once felt impossible. That's the real shift, not the event, but the embodiment. Not the outcome, but the orientation. The field doesn't need you to perform. It needs you to remember. And remember you will. Not once, but again and again. Because remembering is a rhythm, not a destination. Some days you'll pulse strong. Others, you'll flicker. That's okay. The signal doesn't disappear. It simply waits, like the stars, like the breath, like your future self, watching you with endless patience, sending back frequencies disguised as ideas, feelings, dreams, and timing. You are not waiting for a miracle. You are stabilizing into one dot, so let the process continue. Let coherence deepen. Let every gesture become a tuning. Every inhale, a realignment. Every silence, a portal. This is not a technique. It is a return. And as you return, the world around you does too, not because it's changing, but because you are seeing clearly for the first time. And that clarity, that subtle but irreversible knowing, will guide everything. You are not the seeker. You are the signal. Somewhere along this journey, quietly, almost imperceptibly, a new question began to echo inside you. Not, how do I get there? But, what if I already am? That shift was not small. It was seismic. Because within that single adjustment, you began transmitting a different signal altogether. Not the seeking frequency of longing, but the stabilizing frequency of embodiment. Not an asking, but a remembering. Not a reaching, but a radiating. You are no longer trying to become something. You are allowing what already is to find form through you. This is the sacred phase of integration, where you've gathered the threads, felt the patterns, and now, slowly, softly, begin weaving them into daily life, not as an effort, but as a natural rhythm. You are beginning to live from the field rather than toward it, and that reversal changes everything. No longer a destination you hope to reach, the quantum field becomes a texture you move through, a presence you carry into every gesture, every conversation, every decision. What does this look like in practical form? It looks like saying no without guilt, not because you're rejecting something, but because you're in tune with what doesn't resonate. It looks like waking up with fewer shoulds and more soft preferences, guided by alignment rather than obligation. It looks like noticing when you've slipped into old thought loops, and instead of spiraling, simply choosing to breathe and tune again. Not to fix, but to re-enter. The field is not measuring your consistency with judgment. It's responding to your presence with invitation. And this invitation is infinite. You've likely begun to feel it in your body, less tension in the chest, less clenching in the jaw, a subtle spaciousness around your thoughts. Not because life is suddenly easy, but because resistance isn't clinging the way it used to. Your nervous system is beginning to trust you. It's beginning to believe that you will no longer abandon yourself in moments of pressure. That is coherence. That is inner safety. And from that, a new kind of reality begins to grow. People may start saying you seem different, but they won't be able to say how. Your eyes might feel softer. Your energy might land slower. You'll walk into rooms and feel like you don't need to read them anymore. You're no longer adjusting your signal to match the atmosphere. You are setting the tone simply by arriving. This isn't ego. This is presence. And presence, real presence, doesn't perform. It transmits. It doesn't explain. It emanates. There will still be waves, moments of doubt, tiredness, even fear. But now you meet them differently. Not as evidence of failure, but as natural tremors in a shifting field. You greet them with breath, with softness, with the quiet, knowing that the signal is stronger than the storm. That the storm, in fact, is part of the clearing. Just as static crackles before a radio station comes through clearly, emotional turbulence is often a prelude to frequency anchoring. And then something begins to happen, a reality convergence. Not a sudden miracle, but a subtle series of alignments. So elegant they feel almost orchestral. You think of someone, and they call. You imagine a doorway, and it opens. Not because you forced it, but because your signal became undeniable. The field began moving toward you, not out of reward, but resonance. You begin to feel less urgency around goals. Not because you don't care, but because you know. You no longer need the constant reassurance that it's working. You feel it. In your bones. In your breath. In the way your life organizes itself without panic. You've entered the stabilization point. And here, things get interesting. Because stabilization isn't stillness. It's flow without fragmentation. It's movement that doesn't scramble your field. You can be in motion without leaving yourself. You can plan and pursue and build, but not from lack. From overflow. From signal clarity, relationships shift here too. Some deepen with new honesty. Others dissolve with grace. You stop trying to be understood by those tuned to different frequencies. Not out of bitterness, but out of understanding. You know now, resonance is not personal. It's vibrational. And when you stop forcing harmony where dissonance persists, you create space for your actual community to assemble. Soul convergence begins. Not just romantic or social, but energetic. The people, places, and projects that match are stabilized. Signal begin to surface. And then come the initiations, not tests, but thresholds. Invitations to walk the signal in moments that used to shake you. Someone betrays your trust. A plan collapses. A door closes. And in that space where old you would have spiraled, new you breathes, chooses, responds from the field, not the wound. These are the moments the universe responds to with speed. Because they're not about action. They're about identity. Not what you do, but what frequency you remain tuned to when pressure rises. Remain steady. Not stoic, not unfeeling, just tuned. This is where you become not only the signal, but the beacon. Where your field begins to affect others, not by intention, but by gravity. You walk into rooms and reality starts to reconfigure. People feel something but can't name it. A soft shift, a sudden calm, a forgotten hope returning to them through your coherence. You are becoming a stabilizer, not just for yourself, but for the collective. You are no longer only navigating your own awakening. You are emitting the map. And yet you stay humble. Because this isn't power in the traditional sense. It's not about control. It's about conductance. You are conducting higher intelligence through a grounded vessel. You are the field wearing skin, the signal walking as breath. And the more you remember, the less you need to say, the less you need to prove, the more you simply are. And being is enough. Let's speak now of embodiment, not as a concept, but as a posture. Embodiment means you don't just believe in the field, you are it. You don't just talk about quantum shifts, you carry them. In your stillness, in your laughter, in the way you listen, in the way you say no without explanation. in the way your eyes hold someone without needing them to change. Embodiment is less about performance and more about presence refined through integrity. Integrity not as morality, but as energetic alignment. Your thoughts, your words, your actions matching, not perfectly, just authentically. And authenticity sings. The signal you're carrying now doesn't need language. It rides on silence, on softness, on the subtle architecture of how you exist in the world. You become the living reminder that alignment is not a technique, it is a homecoming. And everyone you meet can feel it. Not all will say it, not all will understand, but all will feel the texture of truth around you. That is what it means to walk as a signal, and still your journey continues. Not in circles, not in spirals, but in radiant expansion, like breath, like tides, like galaxies remembering themselves. You are not done. You are deepening. The more you stabilize, the more signal capacity you unlock, the more timelines you can carry, the more coherence you transmit. You are no longer becoming the signal. You are stabilizing it, and the field is listening. By now, the signal no longer feels like something you're trying to receive. It feels like something you've become. It hums beneath your choices. It threads through your voice, and even in silence, it speaks. But it doesn't shout. It doesn't command. It simply radiates. This is the architecture of subtle power. Not dominance, but gravity. You are the still point now. And the world, people, places, possibilities begins to organize itself around your coherence. And this is not ego. This is physics. You've become more transparent to life, less armored against its uncertainty. Not because you know what's coming, but because you trust your ability to hold it. You no longer react out of default. You respond out of clarity. You no longer chase potential. You create conditions in which it cannot help but arrive. And that's the quiet miracle of coherence. It magnetizes without manipulation. It invites without effort. Even your thoughts have changed texture. They're softer now, less looping, less sharp-edged. Instead of asking, "Why isn't it here yet?" you ask, "What frequency am I being right now?" The moment becomes your teacher. Not the moment after, not the someday, this moment. The field doesn't speak in timelines, it speaks in tone. And when your tone matches your knowing, the world answers in kind. There is no arrival point here, no final confirmation email from the universe, but there are markers. You'll feel them. The way old fears dissolve without drama. The way beauty moves you more often. The way you no longer override your body's whisper for the mind's urgency. The way you make decisions that ripple peace, not chaos. And perhaps most tender of all, the way you begin to forgive yourself for the years you spent asleep, for the versions of you that didn't know better. Because now you see, it wasn't failure. It was preparation, not the heartbreak, the confusion, the long periods of silence. They weren't detours. They were compost, the soil for this signal to grow. Roots. Every moment you didn't understand at the time now holds the shape of initiation. You weren't just surviving those seasons. You were assembling the architecture of your future coherence. Pain wasn't a punishment. It was a tuning mechanism. And now, you're in tune. Not every moment feels blissful. That isn't the goal. The goal is clarity, integrity, alignment. Even sadness, when met from the field, becomes sacred. It doesn't drag you back into distortion. It moves through, like wind through reeds, like music through strings. You're not here to be invulnerable. You're here to be real, and resonance requires honesty. You are beginning to walk as an NG, embodied harmonic. What does that look like in the physical world? It looks like trusting silence in conversations, no longer rushing to fill space out of discomfort. It looks like taking long pauses between words, not because you're uncertain, but because you're listening at levels most people have forgotten. It looks like arriving in a room and knowing you don't need to explain your worth. Your energy says it all. And it looks like being misunderstood sometimes, and letting that be okay, that the signal doesn't need validation. It is its own evidence. This is the kind of soft strength the world is starving for. And so, you begin to realize your life is your transmission, not your career, not your followers, not your titles, your way of being, your quiet choices, your integrity in invisible moments, the way you treat people who cannot give you anything, the way you speak to yourself when no one is listening. These are not small things. These are the tuning forks of the new reality, and your signal is contagious. Without even trying, you begin to activate others, not by convincing, but by coherence. Your presence becomes permission. People will begin to say things like, "You remind me of something I forgot," or "I don't know why, but I feel calmer around you." That's not flattery. That's resonance. They're picking up the echo of the signal you've stabilized. And so, your relationships shift. Not all remain. Some drift, some release. But those who stay, stay deeper. Conversation becomes sacred again. Eye contact returns. Silence is shared instead of filled. You begin to surround yourself with others who are also tuning, who don't need fixing or saving, but who are committed to frequency integrity. You become each other's mirrors, not for wounds, but for alignment. Not to trauma bond, but to resonance amplify. You've stopped asking for permission to change. You no longer need proof before honoring your knowing. The universe no longer needs to yell to get your attention. It speaks in symbols, in chills, in perfectly timed delays that turn out to be gifts. You've stopped interpreting contrast as cruelty. You understand now. Misalignment isn't punishment. It's precision. And this precision begins to touch everything. You begin curating your environment, not out of control, but out of signal protection. You arrange your space with intention. You consume less noise, more nourishment. You become aware of how certain sounds, images, even words, shape your field. Not in paranoia, but in reverence. You understand that everything is frequency, so you move through the world like a conductor. Even the way you rest changes. Sleep is no longer just recovery, it's calibration. You begin to dream not just personally, but collectively. You begin to access symbols that feel too ancient to be from this life. You wake up with a kind of memory you can't explain, a felt sense of participation in something larger. Not in fantasy, but in field. You may not always have words for it. That's okay. Language will lag behind for a while. The signal moves faster than syntax. Trust the felt sense, the inner hum, the subtle opening in your heart when something resonates. That is the intelligence leading you now. And yes, there will still be moments of forgetting. You will have days when you feel off, out of tune, flat. But here's the difference. You'll know it's temporary. You'll stop catastrophizing discomfort. You'll start witnessing your fluctuations with grace. The same way a musician doesn't panic when a note is off, they simply retune. You, too, will begin to retune, not with shame, but with skill. You've become a signal keeper. And perhaps the most profound realization is this. You are not alone. There are others, all over the world, remembering their signal. In city apartments and mountain huts, on crowded subways and in silent forests. They are tuning, stabilizing, embodying. And though you may never meet in person, your fields are beginning to link. Like a neural network of resonance lighting up across timelines. You are not building something new, you are remembering something ancient. And together, you're anchoring it. Reality begins to feel less random, more alive. Not just made of things, but of echoes, of mirrors, of choice. You see now that reality is sculpted not by force, but by frequency. And you are the sculptor, the soft architect, the sacred transmitter. You don't need to do more. You need only to be more precise with your being. And that being is more than enough. There is a moment in the awakening process, quiet, uneventful on the surface, where something irreversible happens. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but permanent. A click, a reconfiguration, a subtle folding inward where the part of you that was always watching, always guiding, gently merges with the one who used to search. And in that still meeting, the seeker dissolves. The signal becomes self. And nothing is quite the same after that. Not because life suddenly explodes with miracles, but because the noise no longer holds authority. That is where you now stand, not on a pedestal, not on a mountaintop, but on the soft ground of coherence. Not looking up at the universe, hoping it hears you, but breathing inside it, knowing it's listening. Because it's you. Because it always was. The final illusion was that you were ever separate from the field at all. You weren't. You were just asleep inside it, dreaming of distance. But now, you are awake, and not in the way books or teachers may have described, not as an escape from human experience, but as a deep arrival into it. You're no longer trying to rise above your life. You are beginning to shine through it. The ordinary becomes sacramental. The mundane becomes multidimensional. You drink tea and feel the geometry of the steam. You wash your hands and feel the ancestral pattern of water remembering itself. You speak and hear the shape your frequency makes in the room. This is not imagination. This is precision. You are not a being having spiritual experiences. You are a field of spiritual intelligence, remembering how to be human. And you are doing it well. There is no medal for this, no ceremony, but there is a hum, a soft tone behind your thoughts, a peace that doesn't demand happiness, a joy that doesn't depend on circumstances, a spaciousness in your chest that wasn't there before. You walk slower now, not because you're tired, but because you're tuned. You touch with more presence. You listen with more curiosity. You pause more, not out of hesitation, but because silence has become your second language. Even the future feels different now. Less urgent, less performative. You don't need to chase it. You're walking side by side with it, like an old friend who finally returned, not to show you something new, but to remind you of what you always carried. And this remembrance is changing the grid. You may not see the effects immediately, but reality has already begun to ripple. Your choices, your stillness, your alignment, it travels through rooms, through timelines, through the fabric of the collective field. Every time you choose coherence over fear, you become a tuning fork for someone you'll never meet. Every time you love without attachment, grieve without collapse, or act from clarity instead of control, you pulse into the system a signal that rewrites the equation of what's possible. You are not small. You are not late. You are not lost. You are the one who remembers the map without needing to hold it, and you're not doing this alone. There is a network forming softly, invisibly, relentlessly. Not of rebels or revolutionaries in the old sense, but of signal keepers, of frequency holders, of timeline weavers, people who do not need permission to align, who do not ask the world to change before they tune, who do not seek escape from a body but presence within it. They are dreaming new architectures in silence, and you are one of them. You always have been. Look back gently now, not to dwell, but to recognize. Notice how many times you almost gave up, and yet didn't. How many nights you sat in the dark, whispering questions no one heard, and still got up the next day. How many times your body trembled from too much change, and still you stayed. That was coherence. That was the signal calibrating itself. You weren't behind. You were synchronizing dot, and now look at how your presence lands. Look at how differently you speak, even to yourself. You no longer call discomfort a problem. You no longer name confusion as failure. You are learning to hold duality. You are becoming the kind of presence that no longer needs answers to be at peace. You are the field, walking. You are the question, and the calm that carries it dot. And if, on certain days, this feels hard good, it means you're not faking it. This kind of alignment is not always glamorous. It requires honesty, gentleness, a willingness to feel what's real, even when it doesn't match the vision board. But through that willingness, you become a channel wide enough for true frequency to flow. And when it does, it feeds not just your path, but the path of others. You become nourishment. Even your solitude is sacred now. Not isolation, but integration. Not withdrawal, but recalibration. You spend more time with yourself, not because the world isn't worthy, but because you finally are. Your own energy has become safe, interesting, alive. You've stopped avoiding the mirror. You've stopped apologizing for your clarity. You've stopped waiting for someone else to reflect you. You've become the reflection dot, the one others didn't know they were waiting for. This is the real gift, not powers or manifestations or sudden abundance, but the soft, steady trust in your own signal. A life lived from the inside out. A timeline shaped by coherence rather than control. A nervous system that no longer panics when the unknown arrives. You don't need to predict anymore. You only need to remain tuned. And that tuning happens breath by breath, choice by choice. Not because the field demands perfection, but because the frequency of your becoming deserves devotion. Not discipline, not punishment, just presence, just willingness to return. And return again, because returning is the rhythm of the awakened. You'll notice that time itself begins to cooperate, not always in linear ways, but in poetic ones. Just as you pause, the phone rings with the answer. Just as you release the need to know, the sign appears. Just as you stop searching, the doorway opens. This is not coincidence. It is resonance geometry. It is the field folding itself around your signal, and it only gets clearer. This life you are now walking is not about escaping contrast. It is about conducting coherence within it. Your signal does not grow brighter because you avoid chaos. It grows because you remain steady inside it. And that steadiness changes the shape of things. It rewires rooms. It softens aggression. It calms storms. It dissolves urgency. And it makes space for life to surprise you in the exact language your soul has been whispering since the beginning. Not the loud dream, but the true one, not the fantasy, the frequency. And this is the great remembering. You are never here to find the light. You are here to remember you are it. The transmission you've been listening to is not coming from somewhere else. It's coming from inside the field of your own becoming. You are not being guided toward a destination. You are being invited into a state, a way of being that doesn't end, that doesn't peak, that doesn't exhaust, a way of being that refines and expands and deepens, a way of being that remembers the sacred geometry of stillness, that honors the electric blueprint of your attention, that walks through the world as living light. And now, the field is wide open. You are tuned. You are trusted. You are ready. So now, as you return to the stillness of your own space, whether curled beneath blankets, watching moonlight trace your wall, or breathing quietly in a room that suddenly feels more sacred than before, know this: you are not the same. Not because something loud happened, but because something deep settled. The field didn't give you a revelation. It reminded you of your rhythm. You no longer need to chase signs or decode timelines. The signal lives in your posture, your pauses, your preferences. It lives in your gentle no and your sacred yes. And every breath you take from this coherence becomes a frequency others can feel, even if they don't know why. That's the quiet gift of those who remember. They shift the world without shouting. So take one last breath, not to finish, but to anchor. Let it move through your body like light settling into glass. You are the signal now. Let that be enough. Subscribe to our channel so we can meet again next time. And if you feel the pull, other stories are also waiting for you. Frequencies shaped just for the version of you that's beginning to hum even louder now.